In early April 2023, it was a morning like any other in the warm coastal city of Malindi, Kenya. However, the events of that day would trigger a chain of horrors that would expose one of the darkest and most perverse secrets the country had ever seen. It all began when a frantic man contacted the authorities, desperate for help. His wife and daughter had left Nairobi to join a remote religious cult, but never returned. The cult is known as the Good News International Ministries, led by Paul McKenzie, a former taxi driver with no formal theological training. He had an uncanny ability to captivate and manipulate. With a mix of innate charisma and emotional exploitation, he preyed on the fears and insecurities of his followers, constructing a web of lies and empty promises. In plain sight, he orchestrated mass graves where more than 400 bodies would eventually be discovered. These were people who had placed their faith in him, believing in his apocalyptic visions and dangerous doctrines. But how did this false prophet convince so many to head the path of self-destruction? To unravel these unsettling mysteries, we must delve into the cult's shadowy origins and analyze how the delusional belief in a supposed purifying fast persuaded hundreds to obediently walk to their graves. Welcome to Cults Uncovered. This is the true story of the religious cult behind the greatest tragedy in Kenya's recent history. In the early 2000s, Paul McKenzie was working as a taxi driver in Nairobi, Kenya. However, his passengers soon discovered he offered more than just transportation. McKenzie was a passionate and charismatic preacher, unafraid to express his radical religious belief, even if it brought him into conflict with authorities. Between 1997 and 2003, he was arrested 4 times on charges of incitement, but there was never enough evidence to prosecute him. Each time he was released, McKenzie returned to the streets with renewed apocalyptic fervor. In 2003, McKenzie boldly established his own church, the Good News International Ministries, GNIM. With an intense gaze and a booming voice, he preached against the evils of Western life, medical services, education, modern food. In his visionary mind, all of this was the work of the devil. What began as a small congregation with only a few dozen worshippers gathered in the modest premises in Nairobi quickly grew into a rapidly expanding movement, fueled by McKenzie's claim that he could communicate directly with God. McKenzie's fervor and radical teachings about an imminent apocalypse captivated people. Soon, the ranks of believers grew exponentially. By 2016, a stroke of luck transformed his movement. One member sold their property in Lamu for 20 million Kenyan shillings and handed all the money to McKenzie. With these funds, he purchased properties, vehicles, and even established a television station to broadcast his message. Nairobi soon became too cramped and too exposed to prying eyes. As his flock expanded, McKenzie relocated his operations to the coastal village of Migingo in Malindi. There, far from the scrutiny of authorities, he consolidated his power over his devoted followers. His influence grew so strong that he persuaded believers to sell everything they owned and donate the proceeds to the cult. McKenzie's doctrine isolated them completely from the outside world. From the beginning, the cult's activities raised suspicions. Kenyan authorities started taking note of the cult's disturbing activities in 2017, when it was revealed that McKenzie and his wife, Joyce Mwekamba, were preventing children from receiving education and medical care. They were accused of promoting radicalization and illegally operating a school and TV station. Although they were acquitted, several minors under their care later died due to lack of medical assistance. In 2018, following another criticism for keeping children out of classrooms, Good News International Ministries was forced to close down its headquarters in Migingo. McKenzie claimed the church was shutting down for good, but in reality, it was just moving to a more remote and secluded location, the village of Shakahola, nestled in the jungle area of Kilifi district. There, far from prying eyes, McKenzie and his followers could delve deeper into their most radical and extremist teachings undisturbed. What followed in the ensuing years at the secluded cult in Shakahola became one of the greatest tragedies and criminal cases in Kenya's history. In early April 2023, a desperate father approached Kenyan authorities with a chilling report. His wife and daughter had vanished weeks earlier after traveling to a remote religious commune in the jungle county of Kilifi. The man pleaded for an investigation into their mysterious disappearance. Swiftly, a police team traveled to the secluded village of Shakahola to conduct a preliminary inspection. What they discovered upon arriving at the vast 800-acre property shook them to the core. Emaciated, skeletal figures strewn about, and several shallow, haphazardly dug graves. Immediately, the officers rescued 15 cult members, all malnourished and on the brink of starvation. 4 did not survive the journey to the hospital. The survivors recounted with trembling voices that McKenzie had ordered them into a massive fast to meet Jesus. This was only the beginning of one of the greatest tragedies Kenya had ever witnessed. Over the following weeks, search and rescue teams deployed to the remote grounds of Shakahola uncovered a horrifying scene. Makeshift graves containing human remains, many of them children. In one pit alone, a dozen small bodies were found piled together. Other cult members were discovered wandering near death from starvation. One individual had even been buried alive for 3 consecutive days before being unearthed and rushed to a hospital. The scene was terrifying, and no one could comprehend how they had reached such a point. The true horror lay in the cult's sinister doctrine and McKenzie's ruthless enforcement of his twisted beliefs. Their website claimed, "The mission of this ministry is to nurture the faithful holistically in all matters of Christian spirituality as we prepare for the second coming of Jesus Christ through teaching and evangelism." Operating under the guise of a ministry, they offered the promise of eternal salvation to those who joined their crusade of the end times. Their teachings were rooted in a blend of apocalyptic messages, conspiracy theories, and a vehement rejection of Western values, which they labeled as evils to be eradicated. Their rhetoric targeted the Catholic Church, the United States, and the United Nations, branding them as instruments of the Antichrist and Satan. With his charm and hypnotic charisma, McKenzie was able to attract families and converts from Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Nigeria to his remote commune in Shakahola. There, he isolated them completely from the outside world he claimed was doomed. His followers were instructed to sever all ties with modern society. They had to forsake everything: identity documents, jobs, properties, even their children's education. Complete separation from non-believing relatives was mandatory, a common practice in such cults. Once gathered in Shakahola, McKenzie convinced them that the only path to the kingdom of heaven was through prolonged collective fasting until death. He indoctrinated them to believe that the greater the hardships they endured, the greater the reward in the afterlife. They must obtain salvation through starvation. His influence on the followers was so strong that even after the authorities had rescued the surviving cult members, some of them refused to eat and continued their fast, believing that this was the only way their souls could be saved. Even though McKenzie ordered the mass starvation, he himself did not participate. In fact, dietary menu was found on the wall of his house. The fasting had to follow strict rituals and rules imposed by McKenzie to be valid in the eyes of God. Anyone caught consuming food or attempting to leave the compound would be mercilessly punished. To enforce this, McKenzie recruited a gang of thugs armed with machetes and clubs. Gradually, weeks of extreme hunger began to destroy the minds and bodies of the cult members. Starvation, dehydration, and physical weakness clouded their judgment, plunging them into a kind of deadly trance. Agonizing mothers allowed their children to stop eating. Some descended into madness, while others fell into utter despair. but no one dared to desert under threat of torture and death at the hands of Mackenzie's henchmen. The bodies of those who did not purify themselves through fasting were callously tossed into makeshift graves dug in the jungle. Others were simply left to fate, unburied. Some suffered brutal beatings, strangulation, and suffocation. Their battered bodies with bruises and broken bones were stark evidence of the brutality that reigned in Shakahola. As weeks passed, the number of confirmed deaths and missing continued to rise. By the end of April, the Red Cross had already reported 410 missing persons, including 227 minors. By early May 2023, about 133 bodies were found, the majority of them women and children. But the chilling discoveries persisted day after day. With each passing week, the grim tally escalated rapidly. By early August, the staggering figure approached 427 confirmed deaths and at least 613 reported missing. Lifeless bodies continued to be found everywhere in and around the Shakahola vicinity. By September 28th, official reports indicated that over 450 bodies had been unearthed from the Shakahola forest. This number, though likely not definitive, reflected the enormity of the tragedy, as local media cautioned that the exact number will never be known due to some bodies being disposed of in latrines and pits. Detailed autopsies revealed that out of the 450-plus deceased, 214 died from starvation, 39 from asphyxiation, 14 from head injuries, and 115 from undetermined causes. Some of the bodies were found with missing organs, fueling rumors that Mackenzie may have been trading them. Countless shattered families and lives were cut short by Mackenzie's homicidal madness. This ultimately led to the arrest of Mackenzie and 16 of his lieutenants on 7th of May 2023. Bail was denied to the preacher, who faced charges of murder and terrorism along with his accomplices. Amid a series of controversial rulings, such as Mackenzie's wife being released despite victims' outrage, the complexities of prosecuting Mackenzie and his accomplices for their crimes have threatened to overwhelm the Kenyan judicial system given the number of affected victims. Finally, in May 2024, the decision was made to significantly reduce the charges against the accused from 191 to just 12 charges of murder. This was seen as a more manageable number to expedite proceedings without compromising due process. To prevent this type of tragedy from reoccurring, current Kenyan President William Ruto created a task force to review the regulations governing religious organizations. He also appointed a commission of inquiry into the deaths that occurred in Shakahola Forest. The president believed that Mr. Mackenzie, who acts as a pastor, is in fact a terrible criminal. Terrorists use religion to advance their heinous acts. People like Mackenzie are using religion to do exactly the same thing, adding that the cult leader and others like him should be in jail. However, over a year later, the victims are still awaiting a verdict that will bring them justice. Rest in peace, innocent and trusting souls. May your memory inspire the nation to a future of kindness and fairness. Let us practice faith with respect and keep our minds free from manipulation and deceit. Thank you for joining us. Feel free to share your thoughts and ideas in the comments. If this cult story captured your interest, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Always remember, beware the leader, and never drink the Kool-Aid.